Welcome to Andy's Code Vault, and welcome back to part 2 of my Tetris clone tutorial. Today I'm going to be adding a lot to our Tetromino game, including adding animations, scores, levels, and sound effects. So let's get started. If you are interested in following along with the code, I upload each episode's code to Github. You will find the link in the description of the video. I separate each episode into different branches, so if you want to follow along with this episode, just clone this repo and check out the branch that matches the episode number. The first thing I want to work on is to show some kind of animation when you clear a line. So I'm going to do that in my clear line function, and I'll probably do it right here. What I'm going to do is create a new C# script, call it fade out. I'm going to attach this script to each block prefab, and what it's going to do is over time fade out the color of the block until it's completely transparent. I've deleted the start and update methods because they're not going to be needed in this script. Okay, so I am going to use the update method after all. And the way this is going to work is when the begin fade method gets called, we're going to set a delay and invoke the start fade method and then set this boolean to true, which is going to trigger the start of the delay. And I don't need this global imDelay variable because I'm using the delay in the invoke method. So I'll go ahead and delete that. And in here, if we're not fading, then I'm just going to return and then I'll put in my fading code down below. Okay, up here I've added two more private variables. One is called the renderer and the other the start time. And I've got another variable here for color. I'm going to set all these variables in the start fade method. So I'm grabbing the renderer, I'm grabbing the start time, and I'm grabbing the color. Okay, I'm actually setting the color to the same color as the renderer material, except that I'm going to make it transparent. So that's going to be the only difference between this color and the renderer color. It's going to be completely transparent. Okay, and over here I'm setting the renderer material color in the update method, a color.lerp, and lerp means linear interpolation. And basically it's going to go from your start color, which is the base color, to your end color by this amount. And this is time.time minus start time divided by speed. It's going to transition the color between the base color and transparent, and it's going to use this as the step. There's one more thing that I need to get this to work, and that's the renderer has to be, well, the material has to be set up so that it can become transparent. And there's some variables that you have to set to make it so that it can become transparent. And so here they are. You see these, we have to set these certain floats, ints, that basically tell Unity that yes, we can make this material transparent. So we're going to have to make some modifications to our code in the container script where we clear the lines. So I add these two new lines. One is to call the begin fade script and passing in 0 for delay and 1 for the speed. And then also we don't want to destroy the game object while it's fading out, so we're going to delay that destroy by 1 second. And because I don't want to shift the blocks up before the blocks fade out, so I'm going to have to add a delay to this. But in order to do that, I can't pass in a parameter into an invoke method. So I have to make this list of line clears a class level variable. Okay, so up here I've created a private list int line clears, and I've got my line clears set to the line clears here. Now I'm going to invoke this method in 1 second. I'm going to delete this local variable and change this one to the class variable. I need to add the fade out script to my block object. Let's run this and see if it works. Okay, there was some problems with my previous code. Basically, it was I had this lerp method. So basically, I need to set the starting color and keep the starting color and then use the final color. Basically, the starting color is whatever color it was set at the default, and then the final color is that same color but set to transparent. So let's go ahead and fix this code up a little bit more. Okay, so I've renamed this variable to start color, and I've created a new variable called final color. And over here I'm setting the start color is equal to the material color with a 1 for the transparency, and the final color is the same as the material color but it's 0 as the transparency. And over here in our alert method, we're going to use the start color and the final color and pass in the percentage complete, and then we're going to update our color that way. Alright, now let's see if this works. All right, you can see the transparency is working nicely. So next I want to make the transparency start with the middle blocks and then move outwards. So I'm going to make some changes here and make use of this begin fade delay. So I noticed a little flicker on the animation of the fade out. So I made some changes here, just some minor changes. I'm going ahead and get rid of this change mode to fade. I don't need this method anymore. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And what I did was I just basically went over here to my block and set the rendering mode to transparent. And then I made sure that all my colors here have the alpha set to 1. Before they were all set to 0. So now that I've done that, it should be animating much smoother. Yes, that's much better animation. I like that a lot better. Okay, the next thing I want to add is I want to add the next piece. So show what piece is going to come up next. And I think the first thing I'm going to go here is I'm going to go into my container and I'm going to add a new game object. I'm going to add an empty and call it next piece. And then I'm going to create a cube. Transparent. So I'm going to go over to my images, materials, and then create a new material. We call it clear. And this is going to be transparent. And I'm going to set the color to basically to black. Make it a little bit transparent so you can see it just a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply that to my cube. And I think I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I think I'm going to try 5 by 5. That might be a little bit too big, but we'll try it for now. We're going to move this up here. I'm going to make my game camera a little bit bigger. And I think I'm going to move my camera back a little bit. Okay, that looks good. I think I'm going to make this next piece. Okay, so actually I want to reset this to 0, 0. But I do want to scale this to 5, 5. But now I want to move this piece, not the cube itself. Okay, so let's do 9.5. Let's do 2.5. And then we'll go to 8. There we go. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab a UI element. I'm going to use a Text Mesh Pro text. And I have to go ahead and import my Text Mesh Pro assets. Close this down. So in this canvas, first thing I'm going to do is I want to make this world space. I'm going to go ahead and drag main camera in here. I'm going to remove this component. I don't need this canvas scaler. Okay, I think in my cube, what I want to do is I actually want to remove the box collider. I don't need that. And over here in my text, the text is going to say next. See what happens if I make this 100 by 100. Still way too big. How do I get this down to size? So let's set this to 0, 0. 100 by 100. It's still way too big. Okay, so I set the scale of the text to be 0.005 and 0.01, and now we can see it over here. So let's take a look here. So I want to move this text a little bit up, like so. I think that's good. And I'm going to add another empty game object. Call it next piece. That's a bad name. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and rename this one out here menu next. Kind of a menu item. And then we've got the next piece. This is going to be the spawn point to generate the next Tetromino piece. Okay, that looks good for our next piece. So now let's go into the code. And we're going to have to change this get next piece method up a little bit. Because we can't just grab the next piece. We have to put it in the placeholder first. Okay, so I'm going to create a new transform placeholder called next piece placeholder. And then in my awake method, I'm going to find that from my menu next piece. And then here I'm going to replace this as the parent game object. So next I want to make sure that the Tetromino doesn't start falling and also is not responding to input if it's in the placeholder. So in the start method here, in the update here, make sure and check and see if it's if we should be falling or not. So I've got this boolean called isActive, and it's going to be set to false as default. And so here I'm going to return if it's not active, and that way it won't do any falling or any movement while it's a placeholder. But I need to add a public method, and I'm calling that activate Tetromino. It's a public method, and it's going to set imIsActive to true when it's called. I'm going to rename this method to create next piece. And then I don't need to set the transform. I'm going to comment that out for now. I'm going to create a new method, or recreate the getNextPiece method. It's going to do something different though. Before I was creating the next piece. Now I need to get that next piece from the placeholder object and set it to active. Okay, in my getNextPiece, I'm grabbing it from the next piece. I'm going to get the child element from the next piece placeholder, and I'm going to set that transform parent to our old Tetromino placeholder. And now I'm going to activate that Tetromino so that it will start falling. Before I activate it though, I do need to set the position to the start position. And then the last thing I need to do after getting the next piece is to create the next piece. And here in my start method, I'm going to create the next piece and also get the next piece. I no longer need this Tetromino to be in my start scene anymore. So I can delete that, and it's not working. Oh, a little bug here. I need to make this get the component from the next piece, not the placeholder. Alright, let's try this again. Well, we got our first piece, but I don't see the next piece. It's not showing up. So it looks like our next piece is being instantiated, but for some reason we can't see it. I think something's wrong with the position here of the next piece. Let's reset it. There we go. And over here, it looks like it's coming through the actual cube here. That doesn't look good either. So I've made some adjustments to the placement of the menu next, the cube, as well as the next piece Tetromino. I'm actually going to zero this out here. So this Tetromino that we're going to put in the next piece is going to be all 0, but I'm going to move this back negative 0.5, just like that. I moved this cube here back forward a little bit, 0.25, and then I made the Z scale 0.5. So as we'll take a look here at the sides, it's now a lot thinner, and then also Tetromino piece sits right up on top of it. It's not inside of it, so you're not seeing the overlapping textures anymore. All right, so that looks pretty good. So over here in my create next piece method, I'm going to set this position to all 0s. So something happened here. Why is this piece in the middle? So I'm going to change this position to local position. The local position is going to be 0, 0, 0. All right, so we see the next piece over here. It still looks like it's sticking out a little bit. Let's take a look at it. So what happened was when I had adjusted my cube, I was in play mode. Didn't save my changes. So if you are running your game and you change settings here, it won't save them. But what I can do is I can go like this, set that to 0.5, 0.25. And so it's still running. I wanted to change this now while it was running so I could see it. Okay, so that looks with the Tetris piece in there. So now I can go here and hit. I'm going to go over here and hit copy component. You can't see that it's off screen. Let me drag my window a little bit over so you can see it. Copy component, and then I'm going to unpause it. You see it's reverted my changes, so I'm just going to go over here and paste component values. Let's move my window back. And I believe that this next piece needed to be 0.5. Actually, negative 0.5. Now let's see if it works. Okay, as you can see, there's my next piece, and it's sitting on top of that cube, so it doesn't look like it's there's no collisions with the texture, so that's good. Let's see if it works properly as I play the game. Okay, so it looks like the eye piece is looking a little bit funny there. Let's take a look at what's going on. So it's sitting on top of that, but it's still showing some texture overlap. I'm not sure why that is. So I moved this over a little bit, negative 0.75, and that seems to be fixing the collision there with the textures, and it looks a little bit more centered. So let's remember that value and put it in the code to position that eyepiece. So our Tetromino eye is at element 0. So let's remember that value. And over here, index is equal to 0. So that's just a special condition for the Tetromino eye shape. Okay, we got another eye shape here. It looks to be positioned correctly. I'm wondering if I should move it down a little bit. Let's do that. I want to see a copy component, and then I'm going to stop it, paste component values. Let's run it again. Let's see if it looks good for all the different shapes. Okay, it's looking good for the eye. I'm wondering if I should move that one over a little bit too. Oh, that one definitely has some issue. It's covering over the word next. Maybe I should rotate that one. And same with that one. So I'm going to select the Tetromino J shape. I'm going to double click on that to open up the prefab. I'm going to select the model. I'm going to rotate this by -90, just like that. Save it. Same thing with the L. There we go. Let's run it again. Okay, the eye shape looks good. Well, we're getting a lot of eye shapes. There's the S or the Z. Okay, that looks good. That looks good. T shape is good. Okay, we've got the J shape here. It's up too high. You need to rotate that down a little bit. Let's move the J shape down a little bit. See how much we need to move it. That looks good. So we'll do -0.5. All right, now let's give that a try. Okay, so here we got the J shape, and it's looking correct. You know what? I'm thinking it might go down a little bit further. 6.5. I like that a lot better. I don't need to test that again. Okay, I think the next thing that I want to do is a little animation for when you get the next piece. So over here in the get next piece method, I'm calling the activate Tetromino. I think that would be a good place to trigger the animation. So I'm going to add a parameter called vector3 final position. We're going to pass that into the activate Tetromino. I think I'm going to use this, pass that in there, so we don't need to set this anymore. I'm going to invoke create next piece after 0.5 seconds. That way it won't interfere with our animation. It'll create the next piece at about a half second after our animation. Actually, let's make it a quarter of a second, because it should move far enough away from the next piece area so we can create it as soon as it moves away from that area. I'm creating a new method here called RunSlide, and this is going to run the animation for the Tetris piece. I'm going to call that here in the activate Tetromino as a coroutine. Okay, here I got my RunSlide method, which is of type IEnumerator, taking in a vector3 called final position. So the first thing we're doing is getting the start position from the transform. I'm setting the duration to half a second, and then I'm grabbing the start time, and we're going to rotate it by an angle. So we're going to start at 0 degrees, and then we're changing it by 1 degree per second, or we want to rotate it a full 360 degrees. So I've got a while loop here. So while time.time is less than or equal to time start plus duration, it's going to continue to loop. And the funny thing about these IEnumerator methods is they allow you to do loop over a large amount of time. It's kind of like running this through the update statement and then checking if you're animating, do this code here. So these coroutines are nice because they run in parallel to the update. It's not running a multi-thread. It's running on the same thread, but it's running in parallel to update. So I'm not sure if it runs before or after the update. I believe it's after. But basically, it's just going to run a little bit of code each loop, and then when it hits this yield return null, it's going to stop for a little bit until the next update, and then it's going to run this code again. So basically what we're doing here is we're moving the position from the start position to the final position. We're going to do it over the course of half a second. And then we're also doing a rotation along the z-axis, from 360 degrees to back to 0. So we're doing a full 360 degree loop. And then when we're done, we're going to set the rotation back to the identity in case we're off by a small fraction of a point. And same thing with the transform dot position. Oh, one last thing, I don't want to activate the Tetromino while it's doing the animation. So I'm going to move this over here. All right, let's run this to see if it works. You can see it spin and slide into position. Okay, and here I'm going to add a new method called begin game. And instead of calling create next piece, get next piece in the start method, I'm going to call it in begin game. And I'm going to invoke begin game after half a second. And that way the first sliding piece animation should look better because everything will be loaded by then. Although, of course, I spelled begin game wrong. It's Beijing game, begin game. All right, let's start it. Should wait a half a second, and then bam. That looks pretty good. You know what? The next thing I think I'm going to do is add a background image. Okay, to find the image that I want, I went to Bing Images, bing.com, and then click on the Images tab, and I just searched for Outer Space Nebula. And now I'm going to go here and filter and make sure we're selected free to modify, share, and use commercially. So that's going to filter the images by the license that we want. And I think I like this one right here. So I'm going to go ahead and download it and just save the image. I'm just going to call it Outer Space Background. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to create a quad, and let's reset it to 0, 60. Take a look at the image. I'm going to go ahead and drag that in there. Image. I think it's a little bit too bright, so I'm going to go ahead and change the color. Okay, I think I'm going to change this to a sprite default. Yeah, that looks way better. Oh, I changed the Z scale. I didn't mean to change the Z scale. Quad really doesn't have a Z. It doesn't have a side, but I want to move it back. And then, yeah, I'm going to change the color. Give it a kind of a bluish tint. I like that. Just like that. I think that looks pretty good. But something happened to my next cube here. I might have to move this back a little bit more so you can see it, and that looks pretty good. Okay, next I'm going to duplicate this menu next. Click on this and hit Control D. Move it down a little bit, and this is going to be the score. Alright, so here's my updated menu. I have my score, lines, and level down here. I'm going to move all of these over to the right a little bit. I'm going to go over here and select them all. Move it over just a little bit, maybe 9.5, and maybe a little bit down. And make sure all these are even numbers. There we go, that looks pretty good. Let's run it. Wait a second, I just noticed this. My square's off. Wonder if any other shapes are off as well now that I moved things around a little bit. So the square piece is at element 3. Okay, let's adjust this square piece a little bit. So I know I need to move it over to the left. I think that's good. Negative 0.75. Same position as the eye shape. So now we can move on to updating the scores, the lines, and the level as you play the game. Okay, up here in my container script, I'm going to add a new using statement so I can get access to more features, and that's the TMP Pro. I'm also going to add, I don't know if I'm going to use this or not, but just in case, the UnityEngine.UI. Okay, I'm adding some new text items here, TMP text, and I've got score, lines, and level. And if you don't know, TMP means Text Mesh Pro, and those are the special text I used when I created the menu. I'm going to add these references in my wake method. Got it for my score text. We're going to search for menu score, canvas, score text, and then we're going to grab the TMP text object component. Okay, so here I'm going to add some new variables. Keep track of the score, the lines, and the levels. I'm going to create some private ints. Okay, I'm setting the score, the lines, and the levels all to 0. Actually, the level is going to be level 1. I'm going to add a new method here called update score. I'm going to call that here. And now I need to find out the best place to update the score. I think it's right here on check line clears. So right here, if we have a count greater than 0, I'm going to update the score with some points. I'm going to call update score here, and I'm going to pass it in line clears.count. I'm going to add lines. I'm just going to pass in a 0 as you begin the game. And then in here, I'm going to give you 100 points per line. Line 4, give you a little bonus. I'll give you a bonus 500. Actually, I think I'm going to make that 600. That way, when you get 4 lines, you get 400 for the 4 lines plus 600. That makes it even 1,000. So 1,000 points for Tetris. That sounds pretty good. And then we need to figure out the level. Let's say if we have, well, let's update the lines. And if the lines is greater than or equal to, say, take the level, multiply it by 15. So that means 15 lines per level. Actually, that might be too much. Let's just do 10. Then we're going to increment the level. And now we need to make the game a little bit faster for each level. So let's figure that out. Over here in our Tetromino, we have the fall speed, which sets basically how fast the piece falls. We want to increase this with each level. We've got the fast falling value and the normal falling value, which are constants. We might want to change normal falling to be a variable, not a constant. Fast falling can still be a constant, but the normal falling that needs to get set for each level. And let's find all of these. Actually, you know what I want to do? I just want to rename this and then get rid of the const. Delete that. And then every instance of that should be changed. Make sure that worked. Okay, so now I need to set this from the container when we create this. So I think an easy way to do that is here in the activate Tetromino. So we're going to be here. We're going to pass in a float falling speed. And we're going to set. All right, over here in the get next piece, we need to pass in a falling speed. Okay, I've got the falling speed set to be 1 divided by the level plus 1. So level 1 is going to be 1 plus 1 divided, or 1 divided by 1 plus 1 is 1/2. All right, let's play for a little bit. Oh, it crashed, so let's see what went wrong. Go unmaximum. Let's stop it here. Let's look at our console. Object reference not set to an instance of an object awake. Line 37. Line 37. So it can't find menu score, canvas score, text. Oh, okay. I need to rename these. Actually, I can just use this in the code. I don't need to rename those. Okay, let's give it a try now. So we can see our score was reset to 0 lines and 0 level. Okay, we're about to clear 2 lines. Let's see if we get some score. 200 points. That's good. Let's see if we can get a Tetris here. And we're going to get a Tetris. Should give us 4 lines and 1,000 points. Yes, it worked. All right, now I need to clear a level. All right, what better way to clear a level than to get a Tetris? Should give me 2,400 points and 12 lines. That's correct. And now we're at level 2, and I definitely noticed the speed increase. That's great. Now the next thing I need to do is add a little pop-up message when you clear a level, saying level complete or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this menu level here. I'm going to duplicate it. And then I'm going to delete the cube from it. And then I'm going to rename it menu pop-up. I'm going to set it to 00. Text. I think I'm going to increase this font size. Add a little drop shadow to it. Increase the font size to about 42. I'm going to drag it up a little bit. Right about there. Hey, there we go. I like that. Big text saying level complete. So I've added the text here, pop-up text. So I'm going to find the menu pop-up canvas text TMP, and then I'm actually going to set this to nothing right here. I'm not going to wait until game begins. I'm going to set it to nothing right away. Actually, I'm going to do that with all the text items. And over here, I think I'm going to... Actually, I think I'm going to say, instead of saying level complete, I'm going to say the actual level. And then I'm going to clear the pop-up message after about 2.5 seconds. So I've got just setting the text to nothing. All right, let's test this again. And there we got it, level 2. What I've noticed is the level text is the pop-up text is colliding with our blocks here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take the menu pop-up, slide it forward 1. That looks pretty good. Let's remember to copy it, stop it. Well, I don't need to copy it. I could just enter a 1 here. Actually, was it a -1? Yeah, it was a -1. Okay, and I think the last thing I'm going to do is add some sound effects. Okay, I've got a bunch of sounds here that I kind of like, and I'm going to try them out, I think. You can sample them by clicking on the sound effects once they're in your project and just hit this play button down here. But I like this one for level complete, and this is for line clear. This is as you're moving the pieces around. Might have to lower the volume on that one, I think, because it might get pretty tiresome. Here's for rotate, and here's for when you get a score Tetris. So I'm going to go into my container and add a component here, an audio source. I don't need to add the clip right now, but I will update the clips later, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, I'm going to keep a list of audio clips here and save it as a serializable field so I can use that in the Unity editor. And then we can see that shows up here in my script. I'm going to go ahead and lock this, select all my sounds. I don't think I'm going to use the drop sound. And I think I'm going to delete this one here called move, because that's going to be part of the Tetromino piece and not part of the container. See if I can do that. And just move these ones up. And I'm going to set this length to 4. There we go. Now it's deleted. Okay, the one thing I wanted to do is I want to delete this rotate sound as well because that's going to be part of the Tetromino soundtrack, not part of the container sound. Okay, so now I'm going to add the audio clips to my Tetromino prefabs. So I'm going to create another serializable field called audio clips for the Tetromino. We also have that for the container script. Okay, so I'm going to select all of my Tetromino shapes. I'm going to lock this over here. I'm going to my sounds. I'm going to click and select the move and the rotate sounds. And I'm going to drag it over here. And now I've added these 2 audio clips to the Tetromino, to all my Tetromino prefabs. I'm also going to add an audio source. I don't need to attach an audio clip to the source just yet. I can do that in code. Okay, I'm going to add an audio source reference. And then here I am I'm grabbing a reference to the audio source, and I'm going to set the audio to 0.25 for the default. I might change that later. Okay, here I've added the audio source to my Tetromino, and in my wake method, I'm going to grab the reference and also setting the volume. So I did it for both. Now let's add it to the handle movement function. The best place to do it, actually not in handle movement, but in the move method itself. And so now I want to select my audio, and I'm going to call play one shot. Okay, this play one shot is just going to play a single sound from this audio clip, and it's going to play it until completed. And it's going to do that on movements. I'm going to copy this, go down to the rotate, and this is, so in our rotate method, we're rotating, we're checking if it's collided, and then we rotate back if there is a collision. So we don't want to put it here, we want to put it in the else condition. And we're going to set that audio to 1. Let's go ahead and run this and see if it works. So we can hear the movement. Now I'm going to add sound to the container. It's basically the same deal. We want to do it when we clear a line. Actually, let's do it up here in the update score. Actually, no, we don't want to do it in update score because right here. So which audio clip do we want to play? Okay, next we want to do it in the update scores when we get a Tetris. And which one was element 2? And last but not least, we want to do 3 for the level complete sound. Now that I've got the sounds working, I think the last thing I'm going to work on is adding the level complete, or the end game scenario, which is where you have no more blocks to stack and you have no place left to put a block and the game ends. So let's work on that next. Okay, the way I'm going to define this is in the Tetromino method, in the RunSlide method in the Tetromino class. I'm going to check for a collision. I'm going to check for a collision at its current location. If there's a collision, then it's going to trigger the game over scenario. So what I want to do here is create a new public void game over. Call the game over method, and I think for good measure, game object dot, I'm going to destroy the game object. In the game over, I'm going to say game over in the pop-up text, and I think that should prevent it, because we destroy the game object here, that should prevent it from calling the set Tetromino, which would trigger getting another piece. I think this should effectively end the game, so let's run it. Game over. And we see we're not instantiating any more Tetrominos. Let's take a look, make sure that's the case. So let's take a look. We only have the one Tetromino, and we're not really instantiating more. There's all our blocks. I mean, that looks good, but I think I want to do some kind of animation. And what I'm going to do is, because we have all of these blocks and we have the Unity physics engine, I want to take advantage of the Unity physics engine to do kind of exploding blocks animation. So when you get a game over, the blocks kind of just start falling and then explosive effect. So let's do that. So over here in the game over, I want to loop through all the blocks on the board and add a rigid body component, and then add some sort of force to each of the blocks. So let's do a for loop. And we have our blocks transformed. This was the game object that contains all of our blocks. And we've got the child count. And then I'm just going to loop through here. And we're going to say block equals dot get child I. So grab the child at the I index. And then we're going to block.gameObject.add component rigid body. Let's do a force value. Try 1000. And then we'll add. So we're going to say a new force is equal to a vector 3 using a random range between the negative 1000 and 1000. We're going to add that force to the rigid body. So that should add a little cool little animation using Unity physics engines. Let's see if that works. There we go. I like it. That concludes episode 2 of our Tetris tutorial. In the next episode, I will work on adding object pooling and some further polishing of the gameplay. Thanks for watching.